Hey folks, we're back with another edition of The Big Picture, and this one is a special one. It's very extended. We usually do 30 minutes, we're going to do 1 hour, and it's for good reason. We're speaking about misinformation, disinformation, fake news from across this electoral period and after the post-electoral, the post-electoral period, after the bit redundant. Anyway, yeah, the post-electoral period, and what we can do to try and fight it, what we can do to try and educate ourselves, really. And I'm actually the least educated when it comes to fact-checking now, because I've got 3 people here in studio who can fact-check with me. Someone who's not been here before, Eric Mugendi, programs manager, officer from
manager.
Manager.
Yeah.
Okay. Manager from Meedan.
Yeah.
Then seated next to him, usually sat somewhere up there, is Tracy Bonareri, fact checker with Piga Firimbi, Africa Uncensored. Na huko mwisho ni Tom, we've put him there in, otherwise he's on bad behavior because he's fact checking certain things. But yeah, Tom's also going to be helping us on the show. And like I said, it's really a show to recognize just how poisoned the information environment has been, and the things that you can do to try and avoid it, what things that you might have been tricked by, might have fallen for during this season, and what things that you might have avoided that we've also spotted. So Eric, number one, in as much as you're a fact checker par excellence, what things caught you during this season and you're like, actually I believe that, then it turns out to be fake news?
I think the really clear one is just the night of election day when people started saying that, I think because I voted in Langata, that's where I'm registered, and there was talk about Jalango losing, and it went on and on.
Did you participate in the social media lynching of Jalango?
I was watching from a distance,
yeah,
and I was like, all the memes about like how he'd have to go back to work the following Monday, and I was like, okay. So I was kind of confused initially about like, where's this information coming from? But it was coming from people who I would assume were in the know. But afterwards, when we were doing the kind of the analysis after, we're looking at the initiators of these conversations, and it turned out to be just random people. Like, it wasn't anyone credible. So everyone was just going off the fact that someone has said. But it wasn't really possible to find out who exactly had initiated that.
But was it a bad actor or just someone random who wanted to start a rumor?
It was someone who just wanted to just take up the piss at Jalango. Yeah. Because they wanted to make fun of him and make him look a bit like foolish, essentially. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have to admit I fell for that one as well. Tracy, which one did you fall for?
There's this one that was sent out. Now you're saying that your sources are not credible. This one was sent out by Martha Karua, congratulating Wangui Girishi on her win as the Kirinyaga governor. Fell for that one. Hook, line, and sinker.
I fell for
only
that one.
for me to find out it's fake.
I fell for that one as well. You see, that's why I was saying I was the least educated here in fake news. Yeah, that one I was like, hey, okay, Ngirishi has pulled it off. It's a big one. And again, similar to, I think, the case with Jalango, it was just people who were commenting and perhaps having seen the count, and maybe she was ahead in some polling stations. He said, okay, so this lady is ahead. Tom.
For me, it was this whole debate about Sakaja graduating.
But what about it did you fall for?
Because you hear people saying graduation card, they checked the list, he wasn't part of the list, and this other institution is saying they gave him the pass, so he was part of the list. A lot of things were happening at the same time.
Is this team university said that they gave him a graduation card?
No, he was given a pass by, I think, Commission for University Education.
Yes.
Then there was another statement that he wasn't part of the graduation card for that year from Team University. There were official statements with stamps that said very contradicting things.
So that's a really good question to ask Eric. When there's contradictory information from credible institutions, what do you call that? Is that misinformation? Is it watu kubishana tu, you know, and trying to, what do you call it? I was going to say something else, but it has to do with an appendage and measuring, like a contest, right? But what do you call that kind of information?
So in a situation like that, where there's no clear line of there's no clarity, even though you have an abundance of information, we actually have a term for it at Meedan, it's mid-information. Like there's not enough information for you to draw a conclusion. And this happens a lot in situations where there's an information vacuum, and then when there's a lot of questions about the credibility of the people who are saying these things. So obviously, like the people involved in this conversation, each one of them has a certain agenda. Unfortunately, like you have a university, and I saw some of the memos that were being posted, even with the university stamp with a signature of some high-ranking official saying this guy was not in, especially the conversations around the University of Nairobi, people saying he didn't graduate from UN. And then Teams University came in, and then it became a whole other mess. And in a situation like this where there's so much information that it's practically impossible for anyone who doesn't have access to like the type of records that these universities would have, it's really impossible for like the ordinary citizen to discern for themselves.
Would you call, actually just looking back at the election petition, etc., and the things that preceded that, would you call the various affidavits that were filed by different players as mid-information? Because, you know, one person says one thing, another person says something completely contradictory. Some of these people hold very, very credible offices in this country. So is that mid-information as well?
Yeah, it is.
And can mid-information be spread deliberately, where you have a certain kind of credibility, but you know that nobody can prove what it is that you're saying is either false or true, but you put it out there anyway, just be able to muddy the waters? So
there's just the fact that there's all of this information that is impossible for like a layman to process, especially when you look at the tech logs that are being included in some of these affidavits. And then also, in addition to that, there's some information that is being included that would be considered like private. So that also brings in the aspect of malinformation. So it's not false, but it's not information that's meant to be put out in the public. Like especially when we look at the revelations around the Venezuelans who came in really early on, and then that becomes included as evidence.
And then people dox them and put all of their details online.
Exactly. So we have a situation where you have private information being used maliciously. So it's not false, it's not misinformation or disinformation. It's true, but it's not meant to be in the public domain. And then in the just looking at the volume of information that's being included in these affidavits as well, we are kind of outsourcing the processing of this information to people who should be in the know, people who should be experts, and then also relying on the credibility of the people who are filing these things. Because as you pointed out, some of them are really high ranking, really well respected. So we assume that because it's from someone who has a reputation, that it wouldn't make sense for them to destroy, then they're doing this in good faith, or what they're sharing is true, or what they're sharing is genuine, which is why a lot of situations you find people asking, like, do you have a popular version? Like there's the really dense initial document, and then there's the summary. So summarize it and then tell us what
all of this means.
Yeah, what does it mean? What should we conclude from this? Because it's really not. It doesn't make sense for someone who has no like insights into things like how the tech part of the election was being run, to be expected to draw a conclusion for themselves. But then you have people who have like who have skin in the game, like people whose job it is to recover data, for example, who are speaking about some of the tech aspects of this thing. So you assume because this person is able to speak to a certain technical aspect of this election, what they're saying is true.
It's true. And they can be used deliberately to be able to mislead you. Speaking of deliberate use of misinformation to mislead, would you say that this election, if you were to categorize all of our past maybe like 2 or 3 elections, what would you say about the militarization or the weaponizing, not militarization, that's too strong a word, but weaponizing of misinformation in these past 2-3 elections? If you were to compare, which one is the worst, and which one did you feel had the most diverse means through which misinformation was deliberately spread?
So I'd say, just to answer your second question first, the one that probably had the most creative means of spreading misinformation and disinformation was 2017. Because a lot of the checks and balances that were introduced to their platforms after didn't exist at the time.
Yeah.
And that's when we saw like proper campaigns being run on social media, like targeted ads on Facebook, people seeing videos saying Raila is a lord of poverty, that kind of thing. So these were things that kind of really came to the fore in 2017 because of the stakes of that particular poll. And then also just the fact that they were able to kind of capitalize on the blind spot that platforms had then, and they still have now, for regions in the global south that aren't really lucrative in terms of revenue.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense for them, at least from a revenue perspective, to spend money to safeguard like the online conversations in a country or in a space that isn't bringing them much money. And then I'd say also just the fact that in this particular election in 2022, we've seen a lot of revelations, a lot of investigations around the features on social media platforms that have been used and have been abused.
Yeah.
So how, for example, things are made to trend they're made to trend maliciously, or they're made to trend with a certain agenda. And then also the fact that even after the platforms come out and say we have put in measures to safeguard this election, there's still revelations that they haven't done enough to regulate hate speech, to regulate problematic content, or to contain misinformation. So it's still there. And then the fact that they haven't put in the resources to police content that's not in English or that's not in Swahili means that there's a lot of the stuff that would otherwise like evade detection that's being shared in vernacular.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, Tracy, what were the things that you noticed about platforms either trying to put in place checks to ensure that certain kinds of misinformation and disinformation don't spread as far as they might have, like in 2017?
Well, I've noticed, like for Facebook posts, mostly, if like for most of the posts that I've seen, they have been flagged by Africa Check. So they'll put a disclaimer there. This content contains misinformation, disinformation, or fake news. Open to your own discretion. So that's something. But a problem I have also seen is the fact that Odanga did that whole report on misinformation on TikTok. But when we went back post the release of the report, all the hashtags that he flagged were non-existent. But now new hashtags had come up, still spreading fake news on the Kenyan election process. So does it really work, producing all these reports only for them to come back and generate new accounts? Because it beats the purpose.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Eric, what do you think?
I think just looking at the scale, and then also just the fact that the only reason why they're doing this is because of the visibility of the election. Because if we didn't have an election, they really wouldn't care that people are spreading misinformation. Because we saw this during the pandemic. People were spreading health misinformation left, right, and center. And the only thing that made them act was the fact that it was kind of, there was input from like health bodies like the WHO, and major organizations came in and said, your platforms are being used to kind of contradict the messaging that we're putting out. And the fact that the platforms are able to monetize this stuff, they're able to put ads on content that's going viral, means that they are much less likely to take things down if they are really popular. And then we've also seen that happen with propaganda that's pushing certain messages around like divisive narratives. So like trying to focus on ethnic divisions, trying to like get and the other thing that this is something that came to me is that the pattern of misinformation initially that we'd seen at least in 2013 and 2017 was attacking the candidates directly. But this one tended to be much more sophisticated. It was trying to get people to lose trust in institutions. So making the IBC look like they can't run an election, making it look like there's a certain agenda that is being pushed by certain candidates, so it doesn't make sense to vote because the outcome is already decided, that kind of thing. So like it's trying to introduce the element of voter apathy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So disinformation might actually have had a much bigger role, an outsized role in this election in in terms of the number of people who showed up.
Yeah.
I guess it would be up to people like you guys to be able to measure and tell us as well, right? Tom, speaking of misinformation targeting institutions, was there anything that popped up for you and stuff that we've worked on that perhaps we can talk about now?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of misinformation was surrounding IEBC, as he said, just trying to chip away at the trust the public has in institutions. The IEBC, and one that's ongoing right now, is against the Supreme Court judges, all of them. You'd find posts just randomly claiming that this judge has been offered this much money. And one thing that a parallel line that you can draw between two types of misinformation that we've seen, or two claims. Before the elections, we noticed one that was claiming that Chebukati was offered $1.3 million, and they stated that their source was Interpol. It was a fake front page. We also flagged another one that claimed that Justice Isaac Lenaola was offered a couple of millions by UDA.
Do you have that one actually?
Yeah. I'll pull that up.
Good to look at, because I think the thing about that is that if you're just, as one would, just scrolling through on your phone, just trying to catch up with the newsfeed, and you see something like that, I'd be very surprised if more than a few people weren't taken in by it, because it's really convincing, and that speaks to perhaps a sophistication of the people who are are producing this information in this day and age. I don't know if you have like a sense, Eric, as Tom brings up the poster, of the kind of person, the kind of skills at the very least, that a person who uses the internet to spread misinformation, disinformation, now requires for them to do convincing work.
I think the very basic kind of skill set that someone like that would need is just an understanding of human psychology. So just understanding that if you present someone with something that speaks to their biases, they're much less likely to doubt it, and they're much more likely to spread it. If, for example, I am pro one particular coalition, and I see false information that is saying something good about my coalition, or it says something bad about the other, I'm much more likely to spread it than something that says something positive about the coalition that is not the one that I support. So there's that understanding of human psychology, and just the fact that we are much less likely to do research when we're inundated with really big volumes of information. So you just throw a bunch of information at someone, you just tell them this is what's happening, and then you start like the whole narrative of doing a whole fake Interpol red notice, and then you have a fake Nation front page or fake Standard front page with a story, or if you just keep pushing a certain narrative, like there was a hashtag which was the people versus Chebukati, which is where people were saying that the commissioner has been
he's been bought off.
He has been compromised, exactly. And just building on that, like they were trying to get people to share that hashtag and then say that we're trying to build a case against Chebukati in the Supreme Court, so you share anything that you found, and then people started sharing that. There's conversations going on in WhatsApp about certain candidates, and then there's videos as well that are edited. So just the fact that they know that, like, people spreading this misinformation know that big news brands are trusted. So if you have a fake Nation front page, if you have a fake video with the Nation logo, the CNN, BBC logo, that is something that is much more likely to trigger someone to share, or it's much less likely to trigger, like, I need to verify this as a response.
Okay, Tracy, what concerns did you have as a fact checker going over some of the stuff that Piga Firimbi was looking at? About the information environment and this infodemic, where you have such sophistication, like what Tom's just put up on the screen, right? So that's the fake one, right? But if you were to look at it, it looks incredibly convincing, incredibly convincing. So what concerned you, Tracy, as a fact checker looking through this kind of information?
To begin with the post that is there, we've noticed that when they're manipulating publications' front pages, They only change the headline. So everything else that is in the legitimate copy of that day is still there. The only thing is they either change the headline or they change the images that were used. Something that was also a point of concern for us is during the campaigns, when they were giving their promises and manifestos here and there, they were attributing credible sources. Like they'll say, about 50% of an average person's salary is spent on food. Data from the KNBS. You won't really be pushed to check that because, I mean, it's from the KNBS. Even we fact checkers attribute most of our information from the KNBS. So you wouldn't really be prompted to check. Something else before we move on is how they use humor to actually spread fake news. In as much as we say, maneno ya siasa tusiweke kwa roho, weka kwa lungs, toa. That's just saying things, you know. Watu wameweka kwa roho. So when, like we saw a couple of things. Let me mention just 3. One was a fake Time magazine front page. Claiming, I don't know whether
I think it was on Raila Odinga.
Raila Odinga, yes.
Do you have it, Tom?
Okay.
Raila Odinga, the man who will never be president.
There it is.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this came in immediately after Ruto was declared the president-elect. So
the African issue.
Yes.
A man who will never, with over 20 years of trying to clinch power, the top seat is Raila Odinga down. Like even the blurb, you know, it looks very, very, you know.
It looks genuine,
It looks genuine.
The font is spot on.
Because that's the thing. That people actually putting in the work to like actually design the graphics of these things properly. Because previously you'd see like a nation front page, and then the font of the headline is Times New Roman. Like, no.
Or the color is just slightly off.
But now they're actually putting in the work. They're like trying to match the font as closely as possible. So that's another skill set, graphic design.
Also, not to implicate any camp, but I'm led to believe they have real professionals behind such information.
Inside every camp. I mean that's a great point, because it leads to my next question about the people behind these accounts, right? So on the one hand, you have your randoms, right, who just want clout or what have you. Then you have people who are a bit more practiced at this, perhaps people who produce stuff like this. Then you have people who are operating at the highest level in terms of spreading propaganda. What's the impact of people like that?
I think one of the things that they've actually done is they've made the verified checkmark on Twitter meaningless. So one of the things that that checkmark is supposed to signify is this person is who they say they are. But on top of that, it gives you some sort of credibility. And because all of the people you've mentioned, they have the verified checkmark. And that means they are relying on the fact that they have that checkmark to spread the message that they're spreading. And then because they also have massive followings as well, it means that there's people who are really willing to put in the time to follow what they're saying. So it means they have like the followings are almost in tandem with the followings of like the party principals or the main candidates of their parties. So when they decide that this is the agenda we're pushing or this is a message that we're doing, they are using that like natural amplification that's going to come from having such a big audience to essentially inundate the online space with a particular message, with a particular like topic. So if you want to have a genuine conversation around a specific issue that goes against something that they are pushing, you get lost in the noise.
That's a great point, because I wanted to ask, how do you respond to a person like that with a big following who consistently pushes disinformation, and you might be fed up wherever you are? How do you respond to them in a way that's effective? If you don't have as big a following or as engaged an audience than they do?
So unfortunately, and just considering the company, this is terrible, but fact-checking doesn't work.
Wow.
It doesn't stop the mess.
Tom, tomorrow.
Tracy,
you're boarding a bus back. You've heard it from the fact-checker. Doesn't work. Yeah?
Ultimately,
yeah.
Because ultimately what fact-checking does is you're trying to put out like a forest fire with a teaspoon. Ooh. And if you look at the reach of your fact checks versus the reach of the mess or the noise that you're trying to respond to, they have a much bigger platform. They have a much more visible impact on the information ecosystem than fact checking ever will, which is unfortunate. Yeah. And one of the things that you pointed out, which is the labeling of content on Facebook, that's something that has worked to some extent, because one of the things that happens when you push disinformation on the platform is if you get your content fact-checked multiple times, your page is demonetized. So it means people are complying, not because they have seen the error of their ways, it's because it has a financial implication. But as long as there's no consequences for spreading false information beyond a fact-checker coming and telling you, you're wrong, don't do that again, it doesn't really lead to much. Yeah. And then we've also seen fact-checkers being attacked, because people come and say, like, you as a fact checker, you are using your platform, you're using the fact that you have a connection to the platform to attack me as a person. And then they will get their audience to see you, the fact checker, as the threat. So then it becomes like, they manage to make it like a conversation around motivations, and instead of the fact that they were caught out on a lie. And the other thing that these platforms are benefiting from as well is these people with really big audiences are keeping people online. Yeah. So they're able to push ads to these people, they're able to make money. So it doesn't really make sense for them to take down some of these
platform many of these guys.
Exactly. Wow. Which is why it took them such a long time to take Trump off the platforms. Yeah. Because he was good for them, because he was getting people online.
And he was driving lots of engagement.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're able to turn this engagement at some level into revenue. Interesting. So until we are able to divorce the revenue aspect of these platforms and the content that's on there, the harmful content that's actually making money, which is something that Odanga kind of pointed out as well in his research, when he showed that these things are, like, it's really possible to buy influence on these platforms. It's possible for you to push a certain message, because to the platform, this is just someone who wants to push a hashtag just like anyone else, even though this is a really problematic and really, really troublesome hashtag. Yeah. And just the fact that they're able to, or these are features in these platforms, you're able to pay for influence, you're able to pay for visibility, you're able to get verified even though you have a very problematic past. It ultimately means that what we need to do now is for these platforms to be completely redesigned from the ground up. Okay. Which is impossible.
Great place to leave off this first part of the conversation. Folks, we're having a great discussion about some of the things that we were misled by, some of the misinformation, disinformation, how it works. And Eric just told us that fact-checking doesn't work. We're all a little sad in the studio. But, for the second part of this conversation, just either put on autoplay on your YouTube or click the link that's coming right next.
These platforms are not being built for the social good. They're not being built so that we're able to connect with long lost friends and all these other things. That's just that's an additional feature.
But wasn't that the origin story? Or my college sweetheart, see her 10 years from now, or she's put on a little weight. That's the origin story.
That was the origin, yes.
But what are they today? What are they made for today?
What they're doing now is they are finding ways to monetize every aspect of you. We are really good at finding coping mechanisms.
Oh yeah, man. Because you should have seen those guys who are doing it with even more gusto.
Yeah, yeah.
And then harmonizing above or even incorporating the violence. The guy is being young or there.
Because they just kept singing and they kept singing, and then suddenly the camera is the focus shifts. So you have the audio and then you have Saitaba on one side. And you're like, okay, why are we still hearing the choir?